والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. رب زدني علما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وإن كان رجل يورث كلالة أو امرأة وله أخ أو أخت فلكل واحد منهما السدس، فإن كانوا أكثر من ذلك فهم شركاء في الثلث من بعد وصية يوصى بها أو دين غير مضار، وصية من الله والله عليم حليم. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. So here, continuing with the verses of the inheritance, of the laws of inheritance, better known in Arabic as mawarith, and sometimes it's known as fara'id. Fara'id, jamu farida, that which is compulsory, the portion which is compulsory to be given to each inheritor, as we've mentioned on several occasions already. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that after the detailed explanation about the inheritance of those who are connected through the blood ties, children, parents, and then by marital ties, the spouses. Now, here we have the instance of someone who has no children and no parents. Then what happens? In that case, وَإِنْ كَانَ رَجُلٌ يُورَثُ كَلَالَةً, and if a person, a man, which is mentioned here, if a man is deceased and he leaves inheritors in the condition of what is known as kalala. Kalala min al-kilal means exhaustion, tiredness. So here is it's referring to a relationship which is distant. It is not directly connected through the child or through the parents, or there's a distance. And that's generally what it means. Here it means specifically kalala, that person which the Sahaba have mentioned, and this is the opinion of most of the Sahaba, and it ultimately became more or less an ijma, a consensus of opinion, that person which neither leaves behind, the deceased who neither leaves behind either children nor parents. So whether that رَجُلٌ يُورَثُ كَلَالًا أَوْ امْرَأَةً, whether it's a man, whether it's a woman, وَلَهُ أَخْ أَوْ أُخْتٌ. However, this person was deceased, he has a brother or a sister. Now here it's not mentioned, but it is inferred, and it is also explained by Sahaba, that the meaning here is the brother or sister from the mother alone. They don't share the father, they share the mother. So the laws of the inheritance after the Ashab al-Fara'id, the people who have given a specific portion, the Nabi also mentioned لِأَوْلَى رَجُلٍ لِأَوْلَى قَرِيبٍ ذَكَرٍ لِأَوْلَى the closest of the relatives among the males. So what about so those who have closeness to the deceased through a male, through the father, through the son, etc. From the father's side, from the uncles and cousins, from the uncles. So what about here we have a brother and sister who is not connected to the deceased by the father or by a man, but he's connected to the deceased by a woman, mainly the mother. So that happens when some woman has children from a previous marriage, and then they get married, she gets married to someone, and they have children also. So now the children in the second marriage, of the second husband, they are brothers, what we call akh or ukht min So they are brothers and sisters from the side of the mother, but not from the side of the father. So those who are the brothers and sisters of father and mother. They're called ashiqa, shaqiq and shaqiqa. They are, really, really close because they are from both father and mother. So here, and we have at the end of the surah, the very end of Surah An-Nisa, we have the ruling regarding the kalala in the case when there's no father and mother, there's no children, but there are brothers and sisters from father and mother, and that takes a different ruling. Here the ruling is when we have a brother or sister from mother, so for each one of them will be a sudus. فَلِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمْ السُّدُسُ. So for each one of those, whether it be a brother, whether a sister, and this is peculiar in this situation where we find the male and the female getting the same portion. Again, a brother or sister from mother, not from the father. So for each one of them is sudus, if they happen to be one. فَإِنْ كَانُوا أَكْثَرَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ. If they happen to be more than one, then they are partners in a thuluth, then they are partners in 1/3 min ba'di wasiya. And so that again, they are partners, male or female. Again, this is peculiar to the brothers and sisters from mother's side, that they will have equal shares, both the male and the female. And again, of course, as we mentioned earlier, in the other instances that were mentioned, this distribution will take place min ba'di wasiyatin yusa biha udain, after the wasiyah or any debts that have to be cleared. And as we mentioned, the wasiyah is mentioned first, even though it comes after the debts, because of the fact that it might be overlooked, it might be there might be some tyranny, and it's easy for them to sort of push that aside. Whereas debts, there are people who are going to be, pursuing that rather than the wasiyah. So again, just to reiterate, so after the person is deceased, his own burial expenses, number one, then the debts, if any, and then if there's something left, then the wasiyah up to 1/3, as we mentioned earlier, and la wasiyah li warith, and Nabi also mentioned that there is no wasiyah to someone who is a prescribed inheritor. Now suppose that someone who is an inheritor happens to be, in severe need. So if there is a will that is given to the inheritor and the rest of the inheritors agree to it, right? In that case, it will be acceptable, and probably this would be the situation where that might be prescribed, where there's an inheritor who gets a definite portion, but they happen to be in severe need, or they have some special case or something like that, and the rest of the inheritors go along with that, and they say, yeah, that's fine, we don't have an issue with that, that's okay. Otherwise, that wasiyah will not be enforced, and it's not to be enforced, and therefore it's mentioned min ba'di wasiyatin yusa biha udainin ghayr mudar, not detrimental, meaning any wasiyah which would be detrimental, which would be, causing harm to the inheritors and diminishing from their portions which are due to them. Wasiyatan min Allah, and this is a wasiyah from Allah, and this is the instructions and prescriptions and advice and admonition from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, it must be done. As we mentioned earlier, it is a compulsory tamlik, it is a compulsory exchanging of ownership. There's not, otherwise we can buy and sell according an taradin minkum. But here in mirath, it is a compulsory giving and a compulsory taking. What you do with it after you take it, that's up to you. But it has to be given to the people who have been prescribed, and the people who have been prescribed and they must take possession. Then they can do with it as they like. Wallahu alimun halim, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing and very forbearing. And there's a lot of nonsense that goes on in the case of inheritance, because obviously it's wealth, it's mal. وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ فِتْنَةٌ فِتْنَةُ أُمَّةِ الْمَالِ. For every ummah, there is a specific fitna, tribulation, which kind of characterizes or kind of stands out in all nations. And in this nation is wealth. And I think we're all fully aware of that. So therefore, as we mentioned earlier, this injunction, or the injunction of mawarith, inheritance, stands out among all others that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran itself gives almost all of the details, all of the major principles are detailed in the Quran itself, with a few of those masail mentioned in the Sunnah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand our responsibilities and understand this, as I mentioned earlier, when someone does there is a wafat, there is a death in the family or any one of our relatives, and we don't just go into go to Google or open up a book and start playing around with the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is extremely essential. Not only go to someone who knows, but we go to a mufti who is constantly engaged in this activity, and not just your imam of your masjid or your alim, as I mentioned myself. Although 40 years ago I was a straight A student in Mawarith, alhamdulillah. But since 40 years I haven't really been doing much with it. So I'm not going to, if anyone comes to me with these masail, I will send them to somebody who is doing this all the time, because I don't. So that's very important, and as we mentioned, this is a wasiyah from Allah, this is an injunction from Allah, and it's very critical. And remember that the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very, very forgiving. The rights of people are not. And on the day of Qiyamah, everyone's going to be looking for one hasana anywhere he can get it. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq that we may not find ourselves defaulters in this respect, or any other for that matter. Subhanakallah bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta